First, a bit of background about the GOfermentor project. My background is in biochemical engineering. I have a PhD, and I spent most of my career making pharmaceuticals using fermentations. I spent 16 years in Schering Plough, and while I was there, I got this idea of growing cells in bags to make pharmaceuticals. And out of this, I set up a company, and it was called the Wave Biotech Company. We made a machine called the Wave Bioreactor. And over a few years, it became very popular all over the world for all kinds of applications, vaccines, viruses, and so on. And in 2007, it became quite a big operation, and I sold it to General Electric and decided to do something else. I did many things, but something else was making wine. We had a small vineyard, and we decided we'd like to make wine. I looked at ways of making wine with carboys and containers and all kinds of junk. It was just too messy, too old-fashioned, and the wine was awful because it often oxidized because it wasn't closed properly. So I got to thinking, I'm a fermentation engineer, there must be a way of making wine in a more modern way. So I started looking at what I would like to do to make wine a different way. So first of all, I didn't want to clean anything. So I said, all right, we're going to use an idea that I did back in my cell culture days. Let's use a bag instead of a tank. So you don't have to clean anything, you don't have to wash anything. You take a new bag, you fill it with grapes, you do your fermentation, take out the wine, throw the bag away. Great, that was easy. The problem with winemaking is that it's done with the skins and the seeds. The skins and the seed contain the color and the tannins that make red wine red wine. So the problem is though, when you ferment, it's like a sludge. The calf seeds and the wine form a kind of a sludge, and it kind of forms a thing called a cap. The skin, the seeds right to the top, and they get stuck there and they dry out. So since wine was made, people have always found ways to push the cap back in, to kind of stir the whole system up. In small wineries, they have open tanks and they use poles and they kind of push this stuff in to keep it mixed. It's very tedious, there are flies everywhere, it's all air exposure, it's a huge mess. In industrial practice with tanks, they just pump the wine and spray it around. It makes for a decent wine, but not a superb wine, because the cap is not really mixed in. Now, if we look at how wine was made in France, where almost anything to do with wine was invented, they would stomp it with their feet. It was called pigage. You would climb into this vat full of crushed grapes and stomp on it. And the stomping mixed it up, and it kind of forced the skins to release the color and the tannins. So I said, all right, let us look at how we could do this in a more modern way. So what I did is I took a bag that contained the fermenting grapes, and I attached it to a second bag that could be inflated. So every 3 or 4 hours, the GOfermentor inflates the second bag and squashes the grapes that are in the fermenting bag. And it's like foot stomping. It just pushes them together, the cap breaks up, it then releases the cap falls apart. And so instead of getting a cap, you end up making like a light puree. As a consequence of this, we made very good wine. I worked all this out in 2014, and we made some wines, and people came and tried them out, and they said, hey, this is really very good. You should commercialize this process. So listening to them, I dragged myself out of my nice, comfortable retirement and decided I was going to make commercial wine-making machines. So the GOfermentor was born. In 2015, we made a number of machines. We gave them to wineries in America, in Spain, Italy to try out, to see what they thought, what kind of wine they made, how convenient it was. We did studies in Spain, we did studies in Australia with the wine research institutes, so they could tell us how good the wine was, how easy the machine was to operate, did it all make any sense. In our own winery in New Jersey, we use our own machine to make many wines, Petit Syrah, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and from our first season, we started winning prizes in all kinds of competitions. San Francisco Chronicle, the Harvest Challenge, the Artisan Challenge. I couldn't believe, every time we looked, there was an email, you have won gold, you have won silver. So with all this, we realized that we had something quite unique here. We had a winemaking machine that I guess any fool could do. My wife and I, she is of course a trained sommelier and knows something about wine, knows about blending wine, but the two of us really knew nothing about winemaking. And here we were with this crazy machine winning prizes left and right. So we started to do two things. One, to kind of understand how the machine was making this wine. What was so special? So we did a study in Italy where they compared our machine to a traditional Barolo run. We did it in a chateau in Italy. They ran it side by side, and the wine that we made was better than their wine, which is made the same way it's been done for hundreds of years. It was a remarkable accomplishment. And we looked at what the differences are, and again we go back to this idea of gentle squeezing during the fermentation. We are basically massaging our wine every few hours, coaxing out the color and the flavor. We get no bitterness. People who use our machine, who taste our wine, tell us it tastes a year older just coming out of the fermenter, or the bag as you would say in our case. So the second difference that the GOfermentor does is in winemaking, you have to press out the wine at the end of fermentation. In the fermentation, all the sugar is gone, you have your alcohol, you have your color. You need now to press the wine out and leave behind the spent skins and seeds. It's done in a machine called a press. You might have seen these, there's like a big screw type thing, and you tighten the screw down and the wine gets squeezed out, the garbage remains inside. The problem with these presses are, not only are they very dirty, messy, difficult to clean, but they press too hard. And they press to the point where you get bitterness by crushing the seeds and the stem sometimes. In our unit, there is no press. The GOfermentor is the press. We use that same secondary inflating bag to squeeze the wine out. The grape skins are left behind in the fermentation bag. At the end of this operation, you pull out the bag containing the skins and just get rid of it. In our case, we use it as fertilizer. We take the bag to our vineyard, we cut a hole in it, we take the tractor, drive it up and down, and the skins go back into the vineyard. It's sustainable. It's like a full circle. The grapes came from the vineyard, we made the wine, and we put them back to nourish the vineyard for the next season. Okay? So in this manner, we press very, very gently. And so we get slightly less wine, but the wine is superior. And that is why the GOfermentor works so well. Now, on a sustainability note, in a winery, a huge amount of water is used for washing. Typically, to make a gallon of wine, you will use 5 gallons of wastewater just to wash. And this wastewater is very dirty. It has to be treated before you can discharge it. So there's a cost of that. There's a cost of the waste treatment plant. In our system, since there is no washing, there is no wastewater. So we don't use any water. We use 1.2% of the water usage of a conventional winery. That's sustainable. Our entire winery is run by solar cells. We actually are completely able to run it self-sufficiently. So this is a big deal. And in places like California, water is more and more a problem. It's very hard to get permits for water. It's hard to get environmental permits for discharge. The GOfermentor is a solution. We started with the GOfermentor in 2014. We went commercial in 17. We actually sold units. And in 18, the most rewarding thing was that the people who bought them in 17 bought more of them in 18. So clearly this was solving their problem. And we discovered that we had actually made a machine for the artisanal winemaker. These are small machines, you can do small batches. We had people who were just doing one side of the vineyard in one batch and the other side in the other batch. So really kind of using the automation of the GOfermentor, which makes it so easy to run batches that instead of making one large fermentation, you could easily make 4 or 5 of them and generate different wines. So also internationally, we have units in Spain and Italy. In 18, at the end of the winemaking season in Northern Hemisphere, that's typically September, October, November, we pretty much don't sell a lot of winemaking equipment because the season's done. But this year, we got an article in the Wall Street Journal about the GOfermentor and our process. And all of a sudden, we got orders from the Southern Hemisphere. We got orders from Bolivia. I didn't even know there was a winemaking industry in Bolivia, but there you are, and GOfermentor's heading their way to Bolivia. We got orders from Lebanon. Now, Lebanon is less surprising because Lebanon has an ancient culture of winemaking. Remember, the French colonized Lebanon, so they left behind the usual French trappings of good food and good wine and that sort of thing. So we are sending some machines to Lebanon. The the fermenter is suddenly becoming accepted. For many years, as we started this, people were looking at it in an odd way. How can you make wine in a plastic bag? Want to get odors, want to do this. And it reminded me of what they said to us when I started my cell culture machine back in '99. How can you grow cells in a bag to make pharmaceuticals? How can you grow cells in a garbage bag? It'll never work, and so on. But in 8 years that we've had that company, it grew from a nothing to a globally accepted way of making pharmaceuticals. And as I told you, I sold in 2007, but a few years ago, I found out that I was given an award by the biotechnology industry for the most innovative bioprocessing innovation of the decade, that meaning the 90s. So, it started from nothing and became something that's completely ubiquitous now. Every pharmaceutical company in the world uses one of my old wave bioreactor machines. So I think we are at the stage with the GOfermentor. We have proven that it makes good wine. We've proven that it's inexpensive. We've proven that it's easy to use. Now slowly people are learning to accept it. I was recently asked to speak at University of California, Davis. Now, University of California, Davis is like the mecca of winemaking in America. They're the premier school, the premier wine research is done there. All the major wineries sponsor and fund programs at University of California, Davis. So for the first time, they asked me to come and talk about the GOfermentor. And they were very, very intrigued by how I was doing things in a different way. There was no tanks, there was no stainless steel, there was no infrastructure, there was no water generation. They were spending a lot of money on finding out how wineries can reduce water. Well, one way to reduce water is not to use any water. So I'm hopeful that as things go on, we will get more and more accepted into the mainstream wine world.
It's better than the way I was doing it before. I mean, every winery makes a little different. I'm using open bins, which I'm punching down the grapes. A lot of smaller wineries do that. They use the open top bins and can't let it sit too long after fermentation's done, which I like to do. I like to do an extended maceration, which pulls out a little more color and body and flavor, I feel, and I mean, it's proven it does, but it's not safe to do, but it's okay to do it in these bags because there's no oxygen exposure. So, that's why I think it makes better wine.
Here, why would I use the GOfermentor? And it's cleaner in terms of water wasting. I mean, it's the same dirty thing with GOfermentor or without the GOfermentor, but with GOfermentor you don't use water, and all the dirt is contained inside the bag, so then you can throw the bag anywhere or wherever you want. And it takes less effort and less space to do wine in a GOfermentor than in a traditional deposit.
It does make a difference. And so, I can, maybe my first 2 years, it was not 100% clear, but I think this last year, having now been able to really sort of experiment in duplicate conditions across open bin fermentation and the GOfermentor, I think it's pretty clear and consistent that we get better extraction and better structure and better color, so I think there's definitely, I think it's true, we get better wine. And I will say this too, that we use both methods because I like to mix it up, and so I feel like, if you have some open bin and some GOfermentor, I feel like you can create some interesting blends from that, but it's pretty consistently, better extraction, and probably higher quality wine through the GOfermentor.
Now, one last thing that we've been doing is people would come to our winery and look at the winemaking equipment, and they'd say, why can't we do this at home? Why can't you make us a little unit to make home wine? So last year I did just that. I made a machine that makes about 5 or 6 gallons of wine using 100 pounds of grapes. It is incredibly simple to use. It makes no mess. It's about the size of a small trash can, about 16 inches diameter, maybe 25 inches tall. And we made a number of them this year, gave them out to people to try out, and the results were stunning. So we are going to bring this machine to the market in spring of next year. And it's going to go for $600-700, and anybody can make award-winning wine in their home. No problems. Anyway, thanks for listening to the GOfermentor Story. Cheers.